Hello, this is Greg Hessel from ReGeneration Resources, and I'm doing a series of videos on perception and how perception impacts conflict. And if you saw the intro video, you know that I talked about four different levels of perception. Perception about what's happening right now. That's what I'm going to cover in this video. Perception about what happened during our conflict, who did what, who said what, how it went down. Third, perception about what should happen. And lastly, perception about what always or never happens. Those are the deeply ingrained narratives about how people perceive us, our value, our competence, all of those things. So today I'm going to look at what is happening. And there's really three ways in which we misperceive what is happening. Sometimes we see what's not there. We see what's not happening. Sometimes we don't see the obvious thing that is happening. And sometimes we see what we think should be happening. Our predisposed idea significantly impacts what we see. So I'm going to talk about each of these, and the first thing I'm going to do is show a video about seeing what is not happening, and it's about the McGurk effect.
Watch carefully. What am I saying? Fa, fa, fa. Fa, fa, fa.
It sounds like I'm saying thaw, but here's what my mouth is really doing.
Ga, ga, ga.
Gaw, with a
Ga,
G.
ga,
Except I took
ga.
that audio away and replaced it with the sound of myself saying faw with an F.
Fa,
If you
fa,
close your eyes
fa.
or look away, you will hear the correct sound,
fa,
faw. But if you
fa.
watch, you will hear thaw.
Fa, fa, fa. Fa, fa, fa.
Because the audio and the video don't
Fa,
match, your
fa,
brain comes up with
fa.
some third thing that it believes true
Fa,
reality to be.
fa, fa.
It's called the McGurk effect, and it's a wonderful
fa,
illustration of the
fa.
fact that speech isn't
Fa,
just something
fa,
we hear.
Fa, 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 fa. Fa, fa, fa. Fa.
So the McGurk effect is one example of us not seeing what is there. Our brain takes shortcuts when we have information that clashes. The brain is forced to make choices, and sometimes it just makes things up. Now I want to talk a little bit about not seeing what is there. And to do that, I want to show another video.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you notice the gorilla? There was a gorilla. But did you notice the player committing a blatant traveling violation? She clearly traveled.
So sometimes we don't see the obvious thing right in front of us because we're focused on something else. We can only pay attention to so many things at one time, and we miss the gorilla. Here's another example. This is a slide that I use in trainings, and I've used it over the last 15 or 20 years. And your task is to count the number of F's, as in Frank, that you see in this slide. There's no trick. Take as much time as you want. Pause the video, write down your answer, and then unpause it. If this were a training, roughly half of the group would have written down 3. They see the F's in feature and film and scientific, but miss the F's in of. There are 3 ofs in this paragraph. And it never ceases to astound me that something so obvious can be missed by so many people, but every time it's roughly 50%. Why do people miss the F's in of? Perhaps it's because they don't add a lot of meaning to the paragraph. Perhaps it's because they sound a little differently phonetically, but it's just another example of our brain moving quickly and for whatever reason missing things and not seeing what is, not seeing what's right in front of us. So what's the application of this to conflict? Sometimes we don't see the obvious things that are there just because we're focusing our attention somewhere else. And our mind can only track so many things at one time. And if we're focused intently on one place, we'll miss other things. And secondly, sometimes we don't pay attention to what we think is meaningless. And in conflict, details may or may not be important, but if we don't see them at all, we're not going to be able to discern to what extent they might be meaningful. The last category is sometimes we see what we think should be happening. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to give you a puzzle. And in this puzzle, I've chosen a rule that some sequences of 3 numbers obey and some do not. And your job is to guess what the rule is. And I'll start by telling you that the sequence 2, 4, and 8 obey the rule. And you can test as many sequences of numbers as you want, as many times as you want before guessing the rule. So go ahead and, again, pause the video, write down sequences that you want to test. You can write down as many sequences as you want, and then unpause the video. All right, welcome back. If you're like most people, you formed a hypothesis as to what the answer to this puzzle was, and then you tested sequences of numbers that fit the hypothesis. You tested sequences that obeyed the rule. So the most common guess is people think the rule is that each number doubles. And so most people write down 3, 6, and 12, or 4, 8, and 16. And then they guess the rule. The great majority of the people, 77% in fact, never test a sequence of numbers that does not meet their hypothesis. So what's the takeaway? We see and believe what fits our pre-existing beliefs. In this case, it's a hypothesis, what we think should be there. And we then look for data that supports our pre-existing beliefs. Only 9% of the people taking this puzzle, trying to solve this puzzle, guess 3 numbers that do not fit their hypothesis. The actual solution, the rule in the puzzle, is that each number is larger than the previous one. So you could have guessed 1, 53, and 77. It would have met the rule. And so guessing numbers that don't meet your pre-existing beliefs is actually a way of gathering a lot more data. But because we as humans like being right, most people don't do that. We only test numbers and sequences that do meet our beliefs and support our data. So as somebody once said, what we see depends upon what we think before we look. I think that's really profound. Our thinking deeply impacts our perception. So big picture, what are the takeaways? There are 3 ways we misperceive reality. Either we don't see what is there, we see what isn't there, or we see what we think should be there but isn't. And we do this because our minds take shortcuts. And so don't think that whatever you think is correct just because you think it. Frequently, we think things that are incorrect. And while we all like being right, thinking that whatever we think is correct just because we think it leads to confirmation bias. We end up seeing what we believe and we have blind spots, and we don't end up seeing the world as it is. In conflict, this is a big deal. And the more people enter conflict with a certain amount of humility and a certain amount of awareness that sometimes they're wrong, that awareness is really helpful in resolving conflicts. I hope this is useful. I'll have another video in this series coming out real soon. As always, give me feedback and be in touch. Thanks.